Good evening. Welcome. Starting a very auspicious time and a very important milestone tonight. It's 70 years from Rebbe, 70 years. 70 years starting the 8th decade is a very auspicious and a very powerful time. And I want to use the opportunity to discuss a little bit about general, why do we need a Rebbe? What's the point? What's this whole concept of having a Rebbe? And maybe some stories or anecdotes, if we have time, about his kashrus and the connection that we have, the bond that a chassid has with the Rebbe. There's a famous story about a Yid who was crying in the room of the Maggid of Mizrich. The Rebbe, the second generation of Chassidus, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, he was crying and he said, Rebbe, I need help in serving Hashem. My problem is that all different types of thoughts pop into my head, all different ideas, and I can't focus. I can't control my thoughts. The Maggid of Mizrich told him, I have an idea for you. Travel to Zhitomir. I have a student, a disciple there by the name of Rebbe Zev. Go to this Rebbe Zev. He will help you. In those days, to travel from Mizrich to Zhitomir was a long trek, and it was the winter. And this poor chassid, the way that he traveled, he would hitch a ride in a wagon with one chassid, being a little kind to him, would let him go and give him a ride a few kilometers. And then he'd find someone else, and he would walk, and he walked many kilometers, and he stopped off in different shuls along the way to rest, and there's some inns once in a while. And after many weeks of travel, which a lot of it was by foot, he ends up in Zhitomir. And he comes to this Rebbe Zev's house. He knocks on the door, and he's freezing cold, and there's no answer. So he knocks again, even louder, and there's weiter no answer. So he goes to the window, and he peeks in, a little bit nosy, but he looks in, and he sees this Rebbe Zev is sitting there. He knows him, and he's sitting, and he's in the house. So he starts banging on the window, and he's banging on the door, and nothing is working. Finally, after a long time of freezing and knocking, Rebbe Zev comes to the door. He opens it up. He says, "Oh, Bruchim Habayim, welcome. So happy to see you. Come on in. Here's a place next to the oven. You could warm up. I even have some soup. I put up the soup as soon as I heard the knocking." He's like, "What? You were knocking? You heard me knocking. You didn't answer?" He said, Yeah. Nothing personal. I just wanted to teach you how to control your thoughts." And he told him that just like I am a balabas, I'm in charge of my home. I decide who comes in and who doesn't, and when they come in. Similarly, you're fully in charge of your mind, of your existence, your body, and you decide who comes in, which thoughts you're going to allow, and which thoughts you're not going to allow. You have to control what's coming in, and you have the ability to control it. We learn in Chassidus at length how it's done. It's not an easy process necessarily, but we have the ability to control even our thoughts. It's true, the Alter Rebbe brings in the Kotei Torah, that the mind works constantly. It never stops. You can stop talking, you can stop doing, but you can't stop thinking. But you could control what you think. And that's our job, to control which thoughts are coming into our mind. The Frierdiker Rebbe published a mimer for this day. It was in connection with the yahrzeit of his grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka. And it's called the famous mimer Basi Legani. The Rebbe later said his mimer, his first mimer, and every year afterwards, most years, the Rebbe would say a mimer based on this discourse, Basi Legani. But this Basi Legani, which the Frierdiker Rebbe published, and ended up being the day that he passed away, the morning that he passed away, was Shabbos. But before Shabbos, he had this mimer published in honor of that day of his Babi's yahrzeit. Now, this mimer was really said a few years earlier, or more than a few years earlier. But after the final years of the Frierdiker Rebbe, he wasn't able to speak so well. So they were publishing, the Rebbe was publishing, and the previous Rebbe was saying what to publish, different discourses that the previous Rebbe had already said. And this is the mimer that was chosen for this day. When this mimer was originally said, the Frierdiker Rebbe said this is a balabatish mimer. A balabatish mimer could mean a lot of different things. It could mean that this is it's a balabatish mimer. It's a very acceptable mimer, if you will, or this is a very nice mimer. There's different ways to explain what balabatish means. but doesn't usually refer to the most Hasidic or most deep. It's not a term that you usually use for something that's very Hasidic in depth. And the Frierdiker Rebbe explained what he means when he says Balabata Shemaimer. It's a maimer which teaches you how to be a balabas over yourself. Learning this maimer gives you the ability, talking about the maimer the Frierdiker Rebbe said, how you could control yourself, your thoughts, what you speak, what you do. And it goes through various different stages in the maimer of transformation. It's both through offerings, the korbanos that happened in the Beis Hamikdash, which is the idea of transforming physical, and is the idea of shtus kedusha. If you want to get rid of or you want to transform folly or nonsense or things that are inappropriate, the way to do that is to be a little bit, I don't want to say crazy, but a little bit silly or a little bit irrational, beyond intellect when it comes to spiritual things. Sometimes it doesn't exactly make sense to close your store on Shabbos if it's your busiest day of the week. But Hashem said to close it. It's not going to make sense, but you do it. Sometimes he brings an example of a great Tana, Amira, who would dance with a rose in front of a kala, which is not exactly becoming of a great sage that by a wedding, and it's a mitzvah to make the groom and the bride happy, to dance in such a way, it'd be a little bit more respectable or self-honoring and more prestigious. You don't have to go dancing away like anybody. But when he passed away, our sages observed that there was a beam of light, a high kedusha that was following him, and during his lifetime, and they saw there's something very special about the fact that he behaved in that way. And sometimes doing things that are a little bit crazy, obviously within the realms of halacha and appropriateness, but sometimes you go somewhat extreme, or you do it with a passion and excitement. That's how you transform the craziness in the negative way for good things. But the previous Rebbe speaks about this in the sense of this is a maimer which shows you how to be a balabas over yourself, how to really be a boss. Which leads me to the next concept of what is the purpose of Rebbe. Why do we need it? We have a God, we have an Eibishter, and we serve him. Why do you need a Rebbe somehow? What's the point of this? There was somebody here who came into shul, and it says the pasuk on top of the Aron Kodesh. He wanted to know who's Moshe Mivarsha, who's Moshe from Varsha, and I didn't understand first what he's talking about, Moshe Mivarsha, until he told me. He says in the Aron Kodesh, it says Torah tziva lanu Moshe Meirasha kihilas Yaakov. This Torah, which Hashem commanded us, it's Meirasha, it's an inheritance, right? It's the congregation of Yaakov, which means that every Jew has an inheritance of Torah. Whether you like it, whether you understand it, whether you know about it, it's yours by birth. That's who you have. But it's interesting that it's brought in halacha that when a child starts to speak, the first thing that the father should teach the son is this verse. That Torah tziva lanu Moshe, we have Torah, Moshe commanded it to us, and it's an inheritance. The question is, why is it so important to put Moshe there? Okay, it's important, Moshe gave us, but it's integral as the first thing. Right when you tell them about Torah, Moshe's there. And the reality is that throughout our history, there's always been a Moshe Rabbeinu. A Moshe Rabbeinu who helps us in our connection to Hashem. He brings out this deep essence that we have within ourselves, this deep belief that we have, that we could connect with Hashem, that we have what it takes. But sometimes on our own, or usually on our own, we can't access that. When you connect with a Moshe Rabbeinu, when you connect with someone that is human, and at the same time extremely godly, which means very holy, you're able to deepen your real connection to Hashem himself. We have in today's parasha, when it talks about Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, so we say, Vayaminu ba'Hashem uva Moshe avdei. The Jewish people believed in Hashem and in Moshe, his servant. We believe in Moshe. It's part of our service of Hashem, is recognizing that there's a tzaddik, and more than a tzaddik, but a Moshe Rabbeinu, who's a collective neshama, he's a collective soul, who brings out our soul and reveals it. And just to share several things about his kashrus and connection, the bond, if you will, that a chassid has with a Rebbe, it's something which is not academic only. So you know the Rebbe teaches you Torah, or Moshe Rabbeinu taught us Torah. But there is this personal connection that a chassid has with a Rebbe, and really everybody could attain. there's a chassid in Yerushalayim by the name of Avram Michal Halperin. And this chassid, he once came to the Rebbe, and in Yechidus, he had a private meeting. He asked the Rebbe, complained. He said that we come here so often that I don't feel that I'm changing. I don't feel that a connection. And when he said it, the Rebbe became very serious, and the Rebbe told him that if you're going to be involved in Chassidus with a passion, if you're going to be involved in Chassidus with an excitement, you'll feel it. Which, it's a very important message about being involved in Chassidus and learning Chassidus, how you'll feel something. But then the Rebbe told him that the previous Rebbe says in one of his sichos that in your body, you don't usually feel your limbs. And if you feel something, it means it's hurting. And there's a problem, God forbid. You don't necessarily want to feel. And in Chabad, very often the focus is on internalizing. It's not always on the feeling necessarily that's there. At the same time, the Rebbe tells him if you'll do more and do more with a passion, you'll feel, but don't get carried away with the feeling per se. Another interesting story that Rabbi Zev Gold said, he was there when the Rebbe was going to comfort the Nichol Avelim to the Satmar Rebbe. And so in the early years when the Rebbe became Rebbe, and it was a room, the Satmar Rebbe was a very, very big and renowned Rebbe, and there were a lot of people there, and a lot of dignitaries and communal activists and great Rabbanim. And the Rebbe was very young. He just became Rebbe. It was the early years. And he walked in, and all of a sudden, very quickly, the Rebbe was leading the entire discussion. He was answering all of the questions. He was leading the conversation. It was a very strong presence that the Rebbe had among all these scholars who were much older than him. The Rebbe was teaching, was leading, was explaining stuff. And after the Rebbe left, this fellow, Rabbi Zev Gold, followed the Rebbe, and he said, I'm scared that I'm becoming your chassid. So the Rebbe told him, why does it have to be out of yira? It could be out of ava. Why does it have to be out of fear? It could be out of love. This idea of connecting, it's a positive thing, it's a loving thing, and so on. Another interesting story, Rabbi Mendel Groner from Kiryat Gat, who's coming here tomorrow to Fabring, not of Yud Shvat, he shared that there was once a student, a Hasidic student from a Hasidic family, and he wanted to go to a university to study. And the Rebbe was very strongly discouraging going to these universities. For a yeshiva boy to leave the environment of learning and go spend 4 years in a university without an infrastructure, without a Jewish community, without any of that is very risky. But this chassid, this student really wanted it, and he knew the Rebbe's stance on it, so he came up with an idea, and he told the Rebbe, look, I want to turn in my membership card. Let me not be connected to you for 4 years. I don't want to go against you. I'll back up a little bit. I'll go to college, and in 4 years I'll come back, and then I'll be your chassid. I'm obviously not going to be your chassid and go against you. And the Rebbe told him, and it's a very, very powerful thing about his kashrus, more than the detail of college versus not college. The Rebbe told him, if his kashrus is one way, you're connected to me, so you can decide, you want to stop, you want to take a break, it's your call. But it's a two-way street. I don't stop my connection to you. I don't stop my bond with you. You may say I'm out. I'm not out. The bond that a chassid has with the Rebbe, and the way the Rebbe helps a chassid in the service of Hashem, it's an integral, it's an essential bond. It's a soul connection. Every generation has a Rebbe, starting from Moshe Rabbeinu. It says even before that, Yaakov Avinu was the Nasi and so on. But the Rebbe chassid connection is very strong. A fellow once wrote the Rebbe a letter, and he asked the Rebbe, could you send me a picture of you? Having this connection with you, but it's long distance, and I want to feel, So send me a picture. The Rebbe wrote back that this is not the derech, this is not the way to have pictures. Learn the Torah that I learn. The Rebbe told this particular person that it's Parshas HaShavua, or the Parsha of the week, but there are other answers the Rebbe has given to different people, but learn the Torah that I learned, the connection. It's not about a picture or a visualization per se. Same time, Yitzchak Groner, Olav Shalom, shliach of the Rebbe in Australia, shared that the Rebbe told him once in a Yechidus in Tafshin Yud Beis, 1952, that every morning, whether it's before brachas or after brachas, you should, any chassid should take the time and visualize the Rebbe. Go to a corner and think about the Rebbe. And if you think about the Rebbe, it'll give you the strength to make the right choices during your day. Again, a very powerful statement of that the Rebbe is there to help us with our connection with our bond. Rabbi Shimon Goldman from Crown Heights, after the previous Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe was not yet formally the Rebbe. He saw him and he asked him, "How are things at home?" Rabbi Goldman knew that he's talking about his mother-in-law who wasn't well, and he said that the doctors say she has to be admitted to the hospital. If the Rebbe was here, I would ask the Rebbe what to do. The previous Rebbe. The Rebbe told him, "You have to ask. The Rebbe will find a way to answer." Which means that our job, there's a connection. The day and the reality that we live in, we don't necessarily see or feel that connection. See the Rebbe after Gimel Tammuz. It's a different reality, unfortunately. But the connection is there. And the accessibility and the asking for a bracha and so on is there. And it's very real. Stop here for Ma'ariv. After Ma'ariv, we'll be learning the first two essays of Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, Kosei Legani.
Yeah.